Hello, good Sunday morning. Um, so I'm just here. I'm just refactoring the app, listening to some music. So I thought I would just stream and talk about what I'm doing. So if you haven't, if you're out of context here, I have this family app that I built for my partner and me a long time ago, and I've been using it. It's quite complex in state management wise. It's using Firebase behind the scenes. And I'm just using it, well, partly for, we're actually using it, but also as a way to like reflect and test out different thoughts and reflections on state management. And currently we're using like this constructor pattern with the simplest possible reactive mechanism you can have, which is just called reactive. And we're kind of exploring how that ends up looking. So in the project here, I'm actually re-implementing using Vite because I was using an old version of Next. And there's a little bit of UI now, but a lot of stuff is missing. We need to copy it over. And then I have context, which is basically just the specifics of Firebase. Awake uses DOM APIs. Camera is also using DOM API. So everything that's using something specific from the environment, I just call that context, where I also consider third party like Firebase as environment specific. And then this is just exposed as camera, authentication, persistence, and awake. And then we have state, which is the actual state where everything's behind the session. Like this app doesn't work without the session. So we have this session that kind of kicks things off. And you can see I'm just passing in the context here. So I create the context, then I create the state by passing in the context. And then I create the session by passing in the context. And the session, I'm using a state machine because it's like explicit what's happening here. So either I'm authenticated, where I have a user, I have a family, and I also have the actual family Scrum state, or I'm authenticating, or I am unauthenticated. And only when I'm unauthenticated, I can actually sign in. So this is my session state, and this is my create session function using like the constructor pattern, where we see that I have cached authentication that I'm grabbing first. And then if I have some cached authentication, I'm using that to put it in the authenticated state, or I'm authenticating, where I have an unchanged that flips us into the correct authentication state. And then we have family Scrum state, and it gets the context and the session. I'm actually going to change this. Type params. So let's do this instead. I just want to like really follow the pattern here now. So I'm getting the context and I'm getting the session. And when I have a session, I can point, and this session is an actual authenticated session. So it knows that I have a family now, and I use that family ID to create a family persistence API that allows me to store to-dos and get groceries and everything in the context of the family. And then we create the data using that family persistence. So this data isn't actually exposed to the components. It's just internal reactive data, where it basically just sets up all the data I need for this app and subscribes to changes and keeps that data reactively up to date. And then, but then that data is exposed to, for example, groceries and to-dos. So what I'm working on, what was wrong here? Oh yeah. So this should be context session authenticated. Let's see, I'm gonna change the name of this, rename. There we go. Cool. So what I was just working on is the actual to-dos, and I'm not thinking about the state management here specifically for the UI. This is something we started with, and I'm like, it's been like a journey of reflections, and what this state represents is the state management of the data, really, of this app, because it's quite complex how to actually change the data, do mutations and all of this stuff. So I'm putting that behind this like state interface, which makes it reactive, exposes, as we can see here, for example, for groceries. We have the grocery state where we have a filter, because this filter is actually quite complex. It's using like even Levenstein stuff, and then filters the groceries based on the actual filter. And then you can add a grocery, and adding a grocery is actually like, we have to create the ID, we have to create timestamps, and so on and so on. So all of this is hidden from the components. They have like the optimal interface for interacting with the state management. And then there's like this question of like, okay, so I have this like family persistence here. Should add grocery. So the family persistence has like low level, like set, update, delete, or is it remove, and stuff like that. So, but you could argue that that thing should also not have set, update, delete. It should actually have add for groceries. Like, I could hide even more details into that context, and maybe that would actually make sense, because what I'm exposing to the app as like persistence here is very inspired by Firebase. But I don't care about it being Firebase. I just want to be able to do certain things with the data. But then again, if I like, what if I want more freedom, like in manipulating the data? Like, it's very generic persistence, right? So I'm more free in my state management to decide exactly how I want to change that data. But then I have the types of the data inside Firebase here. Like, here I have all the types, so I'm kind of restricted to updating them in a specific way. So maybe a better way to split this would be to not have any like specific types here. But then we have these converters, which are like very specific. So it's like, I find this very difficult to do. Like, one thing is separating what should the interface between the component and the state management be is very, very simple, because you just want to like consume state and manipulate that state. But when it comes to like this persistence thing, it's like, what's the interface between this Firebase implementation and this persistence? Like, how should that persistence be exposed to the state management? And there's so many ways you can go about it. Like, but like, if I should do it properly, it would be like, the whole point of me like putting that in an interface is to be able to like, well, for me, it's first and foremost to hide implementation details of Firebase. So when you're in your state management, there's no mention of Firebase. It's just persistence. So that means you can like rip out the Firebase implementation and use some other persistence, either for tests or, it doesn't matter. But the most important thing for me is that we don't expose Firebase as a concept in our state management, because it doesn't matter for our state management that we're using Firebase. So it just cleans up the code a lot. So that's a good separation. But then you can argue that these types are actually tied to the interface. Yeah, so like if I would actually have different contexts, like different implementations of persistence, I would have put the types in the interface definition. I don't have a strict interface definition for my context because I only have one context. So the types are kind of mixed in there. So if I were to have like a local persistence thing, I would first create like an interface for my context, and that would hold all the types. But yeah, I'm a bit curious on, like as I said, we're using set here. Maybe that is fine. Maybe that is fine. Well, we're going to use that for now at least. But the point is that like being able to consume, so groceries is like very simple. It has this filter thing. You have add, it shows a list of things to buy. But the point is, from the perspective of the component now, it will actually get this state. So it gets the filter. It has filtered groceries, which is based on the current filter, and it can add the grocery. And that makes it like super, super clean. And when it filters the groceries, it, let's see. There we are, create grocery item. So it creates a specific, it doesn't just expose the grocery data. It creates a grocery item for each piece of data in the list, where you have access read-only to the name and when it was created. And then you can buy it. And that runs the actual like underlying mutation. So it's like super, super nice in the component. And all this complexity is just behind here. Yeah, but then we have to-dos. And to-dos is a bit more complex because we have something called checklist. So a to-do can have a checklist, and that adds some complexity to the to-do. So currently all of this is inside to-dos. But I want to separate the actual checklist item into its own file, because it has like explicit states of being completed or not. And the reason it has an explicit state of that is because only when it's completed, it actually has a completed by user ID. And when it's not completed, it doesn't have that ID. So I want that to be reflected when I consume it in a component. So if I check if it's completed, only then I actually have the completed by user ID. So we're gonna just add a folder for the to-dos here, and then we're gonna shove those to-dos in there. I have an index, and then we have a checklist item. And then we do export function, create checklist item. And we're gonna do a type of params here. I'm actually not sure. Let's see. And then we're just gonna grab everything that has to do with that checklist item. And we can export that. I'm also not sure, like I'm calling it checklist item state. I think it's a nice convention because it dictates like what's the actual thing we're exporting or returning from here. So now we can do this. A new to-do state, and then we have the params needed here. And then we need create checklist item. So let's go and grab that. So it needs a checklist item data. This should really be DTO. Can I rename that? There we go. So it needs the index and it needs the actual DTO. So let's just shove this in here. So we have reactive, and maybe we can just call it data and index. So data is checklist item DTO. No, did it? God damn it. We need to go and rename it here. So I use DTO as a convention to reflect that it's the actual data coming from the server. And then index number. So there's one thing. No, I think that's fine. No, there's one thing I don't quite like about this, and it's the use of index. And the only reason I need the index is because the way these checklist items are stored in Firebase is on, oh, we need family persistence. Family persistence. Let's just do data here. Oh, why is that to do data? This is checklist item data. Oh, I need an ID to do ID as well. It's a string to do ID. Oh no, I need the actual, Yeah, so what I think we shouldn't pass in data here. I think we should pass in the to do and let's see. To do data and then index. And then we don't actually pass this thing. Because we're actually going to use the index to figure out, because we need access to the to-do data, and the to-do data has the, yeah, and this is also so annoying because the checklist is like optional in the actual to-do data, but I'm calling create checklist item here because we have been iterating the checklist items. And I kind of hate this. This stuff makes me itch because I needed to do data to like actually toggle the thing from here. But again, you see this, I'm overriding the type because I know in this context that we actually have a checklist. So you know what? Maybe we should actually to do ID and then we have checklist. Yeah. Checklist item. Oh, checklist data, sorry. So we would have to do ID and checklist data because that we know we have it, right? And the reason we need the whole checklist in each item is because the way we update that is by updating the whole array. Yeah, maybe we can call it data. So now we can Oh, sorry, checklist data. Oh, we need a user ID as well, because we want to, I think, no, I can't do that. Family Scrum. Let's give it Family Scrum as well. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so we have our checklist item state, and it has a title. It has an explicit state of being completed or not. And we can toggle it at any time, and we can remove it at any time. And what we need to be able to build this item is a to-do ID, and we need that to be able to actually do the updates to Firebase. And then we get the actual checklist data and which index we're handling the item. Yeah, and then we have the family scrum state because we need access to the session. I could have passed in the actual user ID. Maybe we should do that. So this is also a little bit like difficult to decide on. It's like, because we need to pass these dependencies down, right? It's kind of like a component. You're passing props down. And the question is like how specific, like in a component, maybe you're more forced to be specific because of reconciliation. Like if you need a user ID somewhere, you actually pass the user ID down. But here we don't rely on that because there is no reconciliation. So do you just pass in the top level thing like we do here, family scrum session user ID? Or should I be very explicit about passing the user ID here? Maybe I should be, because it explains more from the top what we're actually using. And then you could also argue, instead of passing family persistence, you would rather pass like a way to do the toggle and a way to do the remove, where we don't actually need to pass in the checklist data and everything. We can rather do that higher up. Yeah, this is the stuff that I get stuck on. Let's see. But the point is, I have the, like, that's the thing. Like, often you feel that you're too constrained, so you're not able to express the thing you want. That's definitely not the case here. I feel like I just I have even more, like, has too much flexibility that it makes it hard for me to decide on how I want to approach it. But again, we didn't have to put this into its own file. That's kind of what's adding to this, is that I'm putting it into its own file, which means that we do have to pass these dependencies in, as opposed to just consuming them directly from the to-dos file, which we did previously. But it looks super clean. That's for sure. Yeah, and these checklist items, they don't have an ID or anything, so it's like, it just needs to be based on the index. Okay, but let's not do anything about that now. Let's rather make it possible to remove the thing. So I suppose that we really just have to do this. So we're creating a new checklist basically just without that item. Yeah. Cool. And then our to-dos should be much simpler now. Create checklist item. Now it doesn't have all that checklist item stuff. It has enough. Oh, wait a minute. I do have remove checklist item here. I shouldn't have that here. I forgot. Where is it? Remove checklist item. So that's also a thing, right? Maybe that is better. Like, where do I put that? Like, I have a checklist item, and you can just call remove on it, right? So you consume it, you call remove on it. Or do you iterate it and you pass the index to the thing you want to remove? Like, that's also like, I can't decide on that. Like in a React world, you would be more used to being like passing the index or passing the ID to do something with anything, because all the data in React is just data. You don't have like methods with the data. But that's also a problem, because you have to be aware of, okay, this is where I manipulate the data and this is where I get the data, as opposed to, okay, this is my data, this is how I can manipulate it. So I think this does give a better experience from the components. But it could also be confusing, right? Because you're like, where was I? You're kind of consuming the to-dos, right? Or the to-do. And then you have add checklist item, but you're kind of dotting into the to-do. And it's like, oh, I can add, this is where I add a checklist item. But then there's nothing there about removing a checklist item. But when you look at an actual checklist item, that's when you have the possibility to remove it. But then how do you decide? Like when, because here's definitely a good thing, that when you're consuming the to-do state, you can actually, you know what? Maybe the point here is that like this checklist isn't really entities. It's just something that's part of the to-do. So in that context, it's better to like just pass the index of this thing. Like you want to manipulate this list, so you can add to it, you can remove, and you can toggle an item. Yeah, maybe that does make more sense. Or maybe toggle remove on the actual item, right? It's fucking annoying. I don't know. Let's keep it like this for now. Yeah, you know what? I think maybe I want to do it the other way here, because that means this doesn't get so complicated. I can just return the checklist. Hi, Adam. Yeah, I agree. I don't disagree with that. But it's not wrong to say remove checklist item here as well, passing in the index. Like what I guess like I'm getting philosophical on this one. Like what does that mean? Like what does it mean? What does it say about your convention or your mental model if you have remove checklist item like this, or you have remove per checklist item? So you could argue that, okay, the reason you have this is because you're separating your data from the functionality. So you have your data consumed one place, and then changes to that data is consumed somewhere else, and it's your job in the components to consume the data and then pass the references needed to operate on that data. So it kind of signals that behavior. But okay, you know what? Let's just go with this, and then let's see. But then this one is getting a tiny bit more complex, because now we have to what's this? So we have the, yes, we're not doing that. We have index, and then we have checklist data. Yeah. Also, I'm not like consistent about calling things data or whatever here. One thing I don't like about this create checklist item is that they're not as explicit as, oh, I got this out of context. What you laughing about, Adam? Oh, says that we are mental. Yeah. I got it out. Definitely. One thing I don't like about create checklist item is that it looks like any other function, as opposed to if you did this like a component, you know it's a component because it has an uppercase, right? You're creating something. But when you do this, you don't know if it's just a helper function or it's actually like part of composing together this state management. Will be so much better with a class, Adam, because then you would definitely see that you're creating something. Yeah. But anyways, so this is also like so this is also like very nice. Like we have this state of to-dos. We're creating a to-do per item, and then you can add a to-do, and it has all this like persistence complexity of creating timestamps and a new ID and all of this stuff. Even mapping over the checklist, which is just a string here, blah blah blah. And then we have the actual create to do, which you can archive. You can add a checklist item to it. And then the checklist itself is derived from the checklist of the to-do data. And we want to create like this checklist item, which has the ability to like protects the actual data, but gives you the possibility to toggle and remove it. Yeah, let's go with that for now. But this is so interesting. Yeah, I'm what I'm trying to. So one argument, as you mentioned, Adam, is like, well, from a component, like the only time you really want to remove a checklist item is when you iterate the checklist items, right? So it's very straightforward to just on-click to do a checklist item dot remove, right? That's excellent. But then like a consequence of that is, sorry, I zoned out a bit. Consequence of that is that there's so much more code to it, right? that we kind of felt that we had to split it up into its own file, and that's not bad, but it's like, okay, now we added toggle and we added remove, and we still had to add this, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, no, I don't know. Yeah, that's a really good point. Like, we're implementing this as not thinking about the UI. We're talking about this as strict, like, this is the state, this is how you can manipulate it. And discovery. Like, that's the only thing I really care about is discovery. So there's two things here. One thing is like discovery reading this code. Like, how readable can we make the concept of a to-do? Like, someone just jumping into this file and kind of reading, okay, what can we do here? And the other thing is discovery when consuming this state in components. And what's happening now? Okay, so what's happening now, and the reason I feel like this has an itch, is that we're making the code less readable. Because when someone jumps into this thing and they would see to-do state, add checklist item, remove checklist item, and toggle checklist item, they would immediately see this, right? So they would kind of understand the concept of a to-do much faster. And the same would be true in a component. Like, you're consuming the component, the to-do state, and you see immediately what can I do with this to-do, and then there wouldn't be like a checklist item thing here. So yeah, that's going to be my deciding factor. Yeah, and it's very interesting because what if this checklist item was an actual entity in Firebase? Like, it's not just like a string array inside Firebase. Well, almost a string array. What if it was an actual thing? What if this was a project and you would have issues, right? Then I would have create issue, definitely, because the issue is a self-contained entity that could be like presented in different contexts. And yeah, that's okay. That's my conclusions. I'm gonna move some stuff over here. Let's just take these two. Yeah, I'm not sure if we actually need that explicit state now. Yeah, or do we need it? I hate that union. The problem is protecting it. So we are kind of doing that here. So I do want to protect it. So yeah, I think we still need to have that. Yeah, we need to move this back as well. Yeah, sorry, Adam. I got your comment now, so I chose to change it. Let's see. Let's take this stuff. We're gonna move it out. I was too happy with my conclusion. Let's see. So that's remove, and that's toggle. These two things we want to have actually in here instead. So this is just stuff we're gonna read. So this would be checklist item. And if it's completed, so we have that state there. So we can move this. We can still have like create checklist item, but now it's much simpler. Toggle, let's do function create checklist item, and it's a checklist item data. Oh, look at, no, that's not correct. Return. Oh, let's just call it data. Cool. Checklist item DTO. Nice. Okay, and then we need to, actually these two should be, what was it? Remove checklist item index. Oh. And this was toggle checklist item. Let's implement those. Oh, what did I do? I did something. There we go. So that's create checklist item. So this will be toggle checklist item. Oh, look at this. There we go. And this was removed. You'll have to excuse how I refactor. Remove checklist item. Okay, so now we actually have the to-do. Don't we have the to-do here? Oh yeah. Oh yeah, sorry. No, we do have the to-do. Oh, sorry, I put these in the wrong place. These actually needs to be in here. So this will be to-do.id. Don't we have the ID? Oh, to-do data. ID. And now we have this issue of, yeah, so fuck. So another thing I hate about, so one thing that does not lend itself well to this thing is that checklist might be there or might not be there, right? So if the checklist is not there, it makes sense that you can add a checklist item, because then it will actually create the checklist. But being able to like remove a checklist item when you don't have a checklist, or toggle a checklist item when you don't have a checklist, that doesn't quite make sense. So we're not putting these functions in context of what actually exists. Which is the thing I don't like about separating data and functionalities. Like you just have all the functionality on one end and you have all the data on the other side, but there's certain functionality that doesn't make sense if you don't have certain data states. But you can still call it, right? So when you see like functionality dot remove checklist item, like completely unrelated to a to-do, like remove to-do checklist item, you kind of, well, that was quite self-describing, but the point is that you don't know what state do I need to be in to be able to call that, like theoretically. Yeah, maybe that was the argument. Like the point, the reason I'm iterating on this is I want to know exactly why I do it. Like, what's my argument? So my my most recent argument was like, okay, I want this to be discoverable, both in implementation and also in consumption. But now the new argument is like, no, you need to put the functionality in this, in in the right context. And the context for removing and toggling a checklist item is when you have a checklist item. Like, it doesn't make sense to remove a checklist item if you just have a to-do. Yeah, maybe that should be the argument. Can I undo like file creation? I can. Okay, so that's gonna be the argument. And now I just have to try to remember that. Let's see. Okay. Wait. Wait, what happened? What did I do? No. Oh. Ah, what the hell did I do? Oh, god damn it. Index. Family Scrum, checklist data, index, and it was the to-do ID. No, what? Oh, god damn it. What did I do? I broke it. I completely broke it. So, what did I do? So, putting that here. Oh, I hate these kinds of errors. So I'm missing. But why isn't it catching up on this one now? Oh, look at me. There we go. Yeah, checklist item state. Why are you complaining? Oh, did I? Oh, sorry. There we go. We're back. Cool. Okay. So this is like, I'm glad we're gonna kind of got to this point, because this is the whole point of putting, like, creating these states around data. It's to co-locate the actual like data with what functionality is available for that data. That's the promise of discoverability, right? And then it's not only like this is the data and the functionality, but we're actually creating state that can be consumed by components in a safe way. So the components can't just manipulate things willy-nilly. Everything's read-only, right? But then you have on that same thing where you consume the actual read-only state, you can also find the functionality of manipulating that data. So that's what we're doing now. And as we talked about, removing a checklist item and toggling it only makes sense in the context of an actual checklist item. Cool. So one thing, add checklist item, we shouldn't do this. We shouldn't throw. So we should say, yeah. Why are you complaining? Why is it complaining? Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry. So no, sorry. Current data here is, let's call it current to do. So if we don't, like, this is just how it is. With the Firebase, it's like if you do a transaction, you can guarantee that the item is actually there. So we're just gonna throw an error here. We don't really have any error handling. So yeah. Cool. Okay, we're happy about this. So where are we at now? We have we have our checklists, we have our shopping list. Maybe we should jump into dinners. Let's do that. So that's going to be very similar. Dinners, ts, export function, create dinners. Type params, const dinners, reactive, return dinners. Cool. And then let's look at family scrum. We want to have some dinners. So let's call it dinners. That will be dinners state. Oh, I forgot to add the state. Dinner state. Cool. And let's get dinners. And again, this is like the reason we're doing this is because we want to pass in actual family scrum here. I would expect us wanting all of this stuff. Context, data, family scrum, family persistence. Oh, we don't want that, but we want family persistence, we want family scrum. Then we want data state. Oops, not from there, but from here. Cool. And dinners is like, how does this look like? Okay, so you can add, there's a lot of stuff you can do here. Okay, let's go into dinners and add dinner and then new dinner. Let's create a export a type of new dinner. And what was it? No, that's not right. So it has a name and it has a description. And then it has ingredients, which is a string array. It has preparation list. And then it has instructions. Yeah, and then for each instruction. Oh. Hey, look at this. This is completely broken. It doesn't actually work. That's interesting. Anyways, is it because I need a name or something? Oh, this is completely broken. That's interesting. We're not actually using that feature. It was something I added, but we've understood that I'm just unable to make dinner. It doesn't matter how good the instructions are, I'm just not able to do it. I complain a lot about products. Like I everything I see around me is like a product. Like I was just building Legos with our 4-year-old because my mother is visiting and she bought a couple of Legos. Well, that's not true because one of them was like a Lego Technic thing that we built, which is great. And then like the unboxing, like ripping up, like just a manual, how well they actually explain concepts in the manual, like coloring, like pointers to like flipping things around. How do you like placement and everything, and how you open the bags of Legos, like all of that. I think about like, what was their product development process? How did they validate that they created a seamless experience for this? And then there's this other box, which is not Lego. It's called Kogos or something. And it was such a shitty experience because, first of all, I couldn't figure out how to open the bags. Like there was a real risk of me like being angry and just pieces flying all over. It was very unintuitive. And then in the manual, you had like, you could build 2 versions of the thing, but it was all just like, you went from 1 to 9 and then it just started on 1 again. There was no indication that there was like 2 different things you could build. Really shitty. And then for each section, it was like, okay, these are the pieces you're going to put together. That's fine. But then on the next one, someone had the brilliant idea of making the previous pieces you applied the color white, and then put a color on the pieces that you're actually going to put on the thing for this step. But there are white Lego pieces, right? So you don't fucking know. Is this just a white Lego piece, or is this like the Lego piece from the previous step? Fucking awful. And then there were like times where I actually had to just put the Legos on the table and kind of put them next to each other, because there was going to be another Lego that was going to kind of fuse them together. As opposed to like, okay, put part of the fusing Lego piece first on one thing and then shove the other thing on after that. No, they actually explained it as you kind of have to wiggle them in place on the table, and then you had to kind of... It's just awful. And I'm like so curious, doesn't anyone like ask their customers? Don't they like give the box to like the first customer and ask them what the experience was like? It just blows my mind how many things are such a shitty experience, and it's so obvious how shitty it is. And I think this is the whole problem with, like, when we talk about climate change, like I'm going all over here. Like there's 2 approaches. You can say technology is going to fix this, and so that's like one camp trying to solve this problem is like technology, and the other is changing human behavior so that we don't fucking overspend so much. The problem with the people that has that perspective of trying to change human behavior is that they create shitty products to change that behavior. So as an example, like you should throw food, like you shouldn't really throw food, right? that's a problem in and of itself. But when you do throw food, you can throw it into like an actual food bag, like an organic bag, and then you put it into the organic trash, right? But the fucking problem is that these fucking organic bags, they're shitty products. Like, first of all, they're like super, super thin. So when you throw food in it and you try to pull up the bag, it's fucking stuck because it gets like sticky. And then the fucking bag breaks. And then you're like, what the fuck am I going to do? So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that when you do get the fucking bag out, it's like wet in the bucket, like the trash bucket, because it's like seeping through or something. And then you have to like rinse the thing, and then it has to dry before you can put another bag into it. And there's so many products like that, trying to change human behavior so that they actually take care of nature and like try to slow down climate change. But those products has to be better than the existing products. And why don't people understand that? Just my partner, like she's so concerned about like climate change and really wants to work with all of this. And we talk about it a lot. And then I've been throwing, like, when I have my beers, I throw the top, what's it called, the cap. I throw it directly into the trash. So she put up like this glass of jam, or like empty glass of jam. So I could put my caps into that glass jar. Yeah, that glass jar. But she screws the cork on that jar. So now I have to fucking unscrew the thing to throw my cap into the glass, and then I have to screw the lid on again. Yeah, not the cork, the lid. Sorry. I have to fucking screw it back on every time I want to throw like a cap, and it's just a fucking bad experience. And I'm telling her, this mechanism you set up for me to throw my caps into like in an environmentally friendly way, this represents the whole like really bad perspective. Like, they don't understand product development, the people who are trying to save this planet. Oh my god. Ooh. All right. Where were we? But it's true. It's fucking true. So, yeah, instructions. That's the new dinner. And then we have the actual dinners. So that would be... yeah, so let's look at an actual dinner. I'm not sure. Oh, yeah, so when we... Oh. Well, this is how I do it. So, oh, I think this is just wrong. Because when I now look at a dinner, we're actually editing a dinner. Yeah, this is like, I never really finished this thing. Hey, that's an old picture. What was that? Huh, that's funny. Yeah, so okay, but let's just say that we can only edit dinners then, I guess. But we do have this. So this is kind of the list of dinners. So it's just the title, and maybe we'll find something in the UI for this. But I guess like what I think is yeah, we're kind of just gonna return like a read-only version of the dinner, and then there's like an edit. Like you can go and edit it, and that's gonna bring you into the edit screen. Yeah, that's also an interesting thing, right? Did I add a React router here? I think I wanted to try the React router. Did I? React router? No, that was a different project. So I'm just reflecting on what happens when you click edit. So what happens when you click edit is that it pushes a view on the stack, which is like the edit dinner view, and it'll give the, let's see, where did I put the, sorry, family scrum, of course, views context. Oh yeah, I don't have it right here now. Yeah, and then okay, so when you edit a dinner, we can push a view on the stack. How does that look like? Yeah, so what I think is like, when that happens, yeah, of course. So when you do that, let's just add it. So there's like a edit dinner, and then you'll actually have the dinner there. Dinner state. Oh, we don't have a dinner state yet. So Yeah, I'm just thinking about maybe this should just be dinner. No, it's gonna be dinner state because you need to be able to save it, right? Oh, and that's also a thing. Like I forgot, like we put the view stack in the actual component. So there is no, oh, this is interesting. So like navigating, oh, this is very interesting because now we're decoupled from the UI. There is no more view stack. So when you want to move to edit dinner, like the components are responsible for, yeah, of course. So dinners is just dinners. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is much simpler. So so I can say like dinner ID here. Oh, edit dinner and dinner ID. And then we have the dinners here, and that's gonna be just an array of the dinners. What is it? Dinner DTO. But I don't want the user to be able to like just change stuff on it. So we're actually gonna create like a dinner state. Let's just put it here first. Dinner state. And that basically is, it basically is just a read only of, isn't there a read only dinner DTO? And again, like I wouldn't necessarily have to do this, like protect the data from changes in the components, but I've decided I want to do that. So that's why I'm doing it. So let's see, we have dinners is gonna be family persistence, dinners. Oh, sorry, not family persistence, data. Data, dinners, and then we're gonna map those into, let's see, add dinner. Let's just add that as well. New dinner. Oh, family persistence. Oh, look at that. Funny that it does like ingredients. Oh, what do I call it? Preparation checklist. Oh, is it groceries? I call it groceries. Sorry. Yeah, because there's this thing where you can like, you can say that you're gonna have a dinner. Like you can plan the dinners for a week, and then it will actually add groceries to the grocery list based on what dinners here. Preparation checklist. Cool. What were we doing? Oh yeah, so this is kind of interesting how it doesn't really, but we're basically just want to return dinner.id. Get name. Huh, look at that. It's kind of funny. Great. Get instructions. Yeah, what do I actually want to expose? The ID name. Yeah, I guess we can just do everything. But this is also kind of like, when it comes to this like protecting of data, it does add a lot of overhead. Isn't there like a object freeze thing? Prevents modification of existing. Yeah, that's interesting. Never thought about that. Oh, that's very interesting. That's an interesting strategy. Like if you have revalidation, yeah, like you can even do like object.freeze. Oh, you can't do that. Thank you. Why can't I do that? Unknown. Come on. Why doesn't that work? That's weird. It has an overload. It could be because, oh yeah, it's the overload. So it's probably, it can have like multiple arguments, right? There's a version of freeze that has a second argument. No, that's weird. What's the difference between seal and property attributes and values? Huh. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I find it weird that I couldn't do the... Huh. But this is an interesting strategy. It's like... But then you could argue this could also already be in the data. Like you wouldn't have to do it here. That is very interesting. Like what we could do is in data, whenever we go and grab the data, where do we have it? Let's see, get previous week ID, groceries. Oh yeah, but we're adding arrays here. Yeah, but what we could do is map object.freeze. Ah, that sucks so bad that you can't do that. What about seal? You can do object.seal. That is interesting. So whenever you get like a new... So you can just make, you can make all your DTOs, your data transfer objects, you can make all of them basically immutable. Like if they have nested objects, that wouldn't be true, but that's enough protection. Yeah, it's interesting. Oops. I can do object.seal here. But again, it feels, it's like, it's such an overhead. I feel like it's like Redux, right? Like you can mutate the hell out of that state in components. Redux doesn't prevent you from doing that at all. It's just that no components will reconcile if you do it, unless something else causes the reconciliation, which makes it even more confusing, I think. But I think, yeah, so I want to say that this is more like, this is not a concern of, this is not really a concern for this is not a concern for the state management. This is more a concern for the data. So if you want to make your data immutable, you just have to do that. But then again, you can say, like in groceries, we have this filter. And this filter, like, is it okay that you just change it? Yeah, I guess it is, because it's reactive. Yeah, I'm very, on one side, I don't care. I don't think it matters that much that you're, that if you change your data directly, like the UI will be consistent. But yeah, like in principle, it's a bad thing. But it's interesting how you can approach it. You can just say, okay, whenever you revalidate your data, just seal the data, if that's how you want to approach it. Make it read-only. Make it immutable. And then through the rest of your state management, that data will be immutable. You can only read it. And if you want to change it, you have to revalidate the data. Like you do a mutation on the server and you revalidate your data. Given that that's your strategy. But if your strategy is local mutation, then yeah, it's interesting. How long have you been streaming? Oh, over an hour. Look at me. Yeah. Like, I've kind of been chasing this. Like, what if we rather talk about, like, just have, like, a common pattern? Like, we have an underlying pattern. It's not about the reactive primitives, right? It doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter if you're using preact signals, MobX, Bonsify. It doesn't matter. What matters is how you organize your state and your mental model for managing data and exposing that data and related state management to your components. That's what matters. But that opens up like so many opinions, and what matters, what doesn't matter, and so on and so on. It's just more difficult to conclude on how something should work. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, to really think about how you want something to work isn't a bad thing. But it would be nice to have, like, that's what I want, like, this documentation to be. I just want it to be like some opinions that you can choose to adopt, right? You don't have to adopt sealing your data. You don't have to adopt putting functions with your data, or like how to change that data with the data itself. Don't have to do that. It's just an opinion. And this is how to do it. But what's interesting about like using Firebase here is like it has revalidation. Well, for most of it, this is going to be the interesting thing, because when we jump into the planning of the week, this is much more complex. So here I want to try optimizing it. I don't want, when I flip this one here, I don't want that to reconcile everything, right? I want that to just reconcile this part. So that means that if I seal that data, I can't change it, right? But I want to be able to do that. But I only want to change it from within my data store. I don't want to change it from the components. It's very interesting. You could even have a pattern where, like, changing something, like you use getters and setters, or you use setters basically. So whenever you set something, you just sync it to Firebase. So there's no like add dinner or anything. You basically just look at arrays and property setters, and then you just sync it to Firebase. That's also an interesting approach. By the way, I'm building a... Hallo? Jeg holder på å streame. Hva skal det? Har jeg truse? Ja, truse. It's just my mother. Like, I'm in the basement office, and then we have a bed here. Let's see. What the hell were we talking about? Oh yeah, like what patterns to adopt. But maybe that would be a nice addition. Because one thing, yeah. So, you know, like the documentation, Bonsify documentation. So you have like, oh, where did it go? There we have it. Oh, interesting. So, so you have like core patterns. Like this is a pattern. I think this is the constructor pattern. Like, and then another pattern is like, okay, you want to create this context, and this is about like separating environment specifics from... Yeah, so that's one pattern, like the constructor pattern. And then you have there are different data fetching patterns where we talked about, like, you have local mutations. That's one pattern. And then you have revalidate on mutations, which is basically what I'm doing with Firebase now. Or actually, automatic sync is what I'm doing with Firebase now. So that's another kind of patterns. And then you have, the context thing, which is only about, like, okay, remove third-party APIs from your state management. And you can put them in a context that you pass to your state management. And then this pattern we're talking about now, which is like not exposing data to your components. That's another pattern. Like, you don't have to do it. But when you fetch data in your state management, you can literally keep that data and not exposed on your state management to components. But when you do expose certain pieces of data, you want to make it read-only, right? That's just a different pattern. And you can choose to adopt it or not. And so this is what I really want to do. I think it's much better to teach people patterns like this instead of creating frameworks that has a strong opinion about it. I don't mean to say that it's better. I'm just trying to say that it's missing, because now there are only frameworks with opinions, as opposed to, okay, we're not going to have opinions. We're going to let you choose the patterns that makes the most sense for you and your team and the application you're building. And then we don't care about what reactive primitives you choose to do this. These are just patterns that promises certain guarantees or whatever. Yeah, so I'm going to rewrite the docs again here. Yeah, and then it's going to be constructor pattern, data fetching patterns. State machine is also a pattern. Promises is very interesting because that's also a pattern, how you actually store promises in your state management to consume data, async data. That's a pattern. You have mutations. That's another pattern where so now with Firebase, I'm not actually performing, like, observing the mutation. I'm just running it because it's so fast. But what you can do is, like, whenever you run a mutation, you can actually add like a mutation property. So for example, if like count was like crazy async, what I could do is, like, I could do add a count mutation here, and that count mutation would hold what I'm trying to count to, and that can be the promise of actually performing the count, I think. Or should it be? No, sorry, it shouldn't be. Sorry. So the pattern is, you have something called counting or count mutation, or something that reflects the process of performing the count, right? Because it's async. And that's a property that's only there when you're actually doing it. So in a component, you can now look at counting, for example. And if it's there, we're going to actually show that as an optimistic piece of data. But then when the mutation is done, counting isn't there anymore, and there is no more optimistic data. It's a really nice way to deal with optimistic data in components. So I guess that's the pattern, like optimistic data. Yeah, maybe that should be part of data fetching. Anyways, yeah. So I think I'm gonna stop streaming. I'm getting a bit tired of this. But what I want to do here is like, what's special about dinners is that it doesn't really have any. You can't really do anything with it other than editing it. But editing it is like, editing it is. Well, I guess one thing we can add here is like the image, because the image is now very decoupled. We can bring that together. But the point is that dinners isn't like, it's like a kind of a read-only entity, because you don't have like, you're not. Yeah, I guess you can remove it. Yeah, so you can remove it and you can edit it. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I'm gonna stop there. Or maybe, you know what? I never had a Sunday where I can sit and stream for this long. Maybe we should just go in and write some documentation. Because, yeah, I'm tired of coding. Let's see, do I have Bonsify here? By the way, the really cool project, I'm gonna start streaming when all the pieces are in place, but we're working on something very, very interesting. So with Code Sandbox, I don't know if you've seen it. So Code Sandbox SDK. So we released this SDK for Code Sandbox, which is amazing for AI. It basically gives you Code Sandbox as an SDK, and you can do everything that you can like do in a dev box on Code Sandbox, but you do it programmatically, right? Which is excellent for AIs. The challenge though is that we build Code Sandbox and this functionality based on having a user session. Like you go to Code Sandbox and you use kind of VS Code to work in a session, making code changes and everything. But AIs are different. They don't really need that session. They just need a reference to like a sandbox or devbox, whatever. It's a VM. It just needs to be able to call like a REST endpoint. Like this is the sandbox with this ID. Go and write a file there. So we're working on that, and that means that you can run this on the edge as well, which opens up so many awesome opportunities. It's like, yeah, it's pretty amazing. But one thing that I've discovered quite early on, because I did like this project, I streamed it a bunch, where I built like a very early version of an agent. And what I did is that I built like a template using Firebase. And the idea was like, as a user who doesn't know how to code, and definitely as a consumer of the application you're trying to build, they don't care about you using Vite and React and Firebase and whatever. It doesn't matter. So I just set up this template, and then you would just use this agent to build up an application. The problem though, to be able to actually expose that to someone else, you would still have to go to Firebase to create your own Firebase account. You would have to set up authentication. You would have to set up Firestore. You would have to do all these things to be able to actually start building anything. And then I thought, like, what if you rather create a service that is a Firebase project? So the service itself has a Firebase project. And in that service, you can sign in, you can create a project. And when you create that project, it will actually create a sandbox for you under the hood at Code Sandbox. And then when you open the project, you see a chat window. You chat with an agent. And this agent is is able to communicate with that sandbox and make changes for you. But the cool thing is that the sandbox is forked from a template that connects to the same Firebase. So it's like a multi-tenant Firebase where I've, as the owner of the service, I've set up authentication, persistence, everything. And then we just scope your sandbox to like a part of the persistence. And so when you, how should I put this? I should have drawn it up. So the point is that when you share your sandbox link with someone, they can already authenticate with Google. Like, you don't have to do anything. You just create your project in this service. You get a chat box, you get a link to the preview URL, and you can already sign into it. And whatever user signs into it, they are scoped to your application, to your project. So as you're asking this agent in your project to like build me a multiplayer tic-tac-toe game, it can do that because it has authentication. So it has users, it has Firestore, it has real-time updates, and it can just build that for you. And you can immediately give that link to someone, and you can start doing multiplayer tic-tac-toe with persistence and leaderboards and everything. And that's when it gets cool. Like, all these services that lets you, like, even like V0 from Vercel, Bolt, all of these ones, they're too low level in the sense that either you can only like do UI stuff, or it's so open-ended what you can do in terms of persistence and authentication that as a user, you have to go into all these other services and set up persistence and set up this and set up that. While here, it's like just out of the box, which is really, really cool. And I think, like, you wouldn't build Airbnb that way, right? But maybe you have just something you need for work or something for your local community. Like, you just have the idea, you just want to put it in there, and then immediately people can start using it. And yeah, the core of it is that authentication, persistence, and storage just works out of the box. But that it won't work until we have what we call a stateless SDK, which I hope to start working on next week. That's kind of cool. I don't know if that made any sense, but it's pretty awesome. Let's see. Where's the documentation? Yeah, so sorry if this is a little bit boring, but I'm gonna be talking through everything here. So I'm gonna rename this to constructor pattern, constructor pattern, with state management. We can make it a little bit bigger. At its core is about creating an interface to consume state behaviors. With React, this interface needs to be reactive. The constructor. Oh my, no, I don't want to write either. I think I'm just tired. Sorry. Yeah, I think I'm just going to do something else. Yeah, I think it is definitely really cool. But I'm also super excited about like being able to run, like make an agent develop something on the edge. That's insanely exciting. That is insanely exciting. Because it just means that you can have like you can have a concept of a project, and that project is bound to some development environment somewhere, right? And then you can interact with that environment through an LLM at any point in time. You don't need to set up a session or anything. Like it's just ask it something, it goes off and do something. Yeah, and I think this is why we haven't seen, like there's still, like we're talking about how AI is peaking, and it definitely seems to be in terms of like just scaling up the current approach. But then you get to like reasoning models, and then you get edge environment, development environments they can use, and like you get all these tools. Like it's about the abstractions you put on top of this. It's not about the core technology. That isn't the thing that's going to make it valuable. It's the abstractions we put on top of it. Even though like making the core functionality better, like making models bigger and all of this stuff, like it's important, but it's not the thing that creates value at the end of the day. It's the abstractions on top of it. And we're so not done making these abstractions. So yeah, I'm pumped. I'm super pumped. But anyways, I think I'm going to play around with some more documentation on this. And then what we're going to do, like, as I continue to refactor the family Scrum app, is that I'm going to be able to like point to, oh, I'm using this pattern here. It's documented here. I think that's what I want to do with this family Scrum refactor. It's like, I'm going to reference it here. And then I'm going to like point to the different like patterns I'm using to build it. Yeah. And then I'm not sure, like, but these patterns aren't really tied to the Bonsify project or the Bonsify like reactive primitive. Like you can use, as I said, MobX or whatever you want there. So I tried to create like a Git book and started like, I made like a AI generated welcome, and then I lost my motivation. So I'm not sure how to, I think it's my age. I don't have the stamina to like get things done. I will always have the stamina to have ideas and create proof of concepts. But when it comes to actually like making something real, I'm not sure if I really have the stamina anymore, because it requires so much time and I don't have time. So yeah, anyways, thanks for following along. I think I'm gonna make I'm gonna extract my rant on product development and make like a YouTube short or something. I've never done that. I felt amazing. Anyways, bye for now. Have a great Sunday, and then I guess we'll talk next week. Bye bye.